Welcome back, learner, with the course Rudimentary Principle and Practices of Managerial Economics. Today, we are going to discuss Module 3, Consumer Behavior Part 2, Lecture number 14, continuing with the topic Indifference Curve Analysis. In the previous class, we discussed about consumer equilibrium through indifference curve analysis, in which we discussed the price line, the budget line and consumer equilibrium. In today's session, we are going to study the importance and limitation of indifference curve. Importance. Importance means the benefits of using this indifference curve analysis. So, this indifference curve is a modern concept based on ordinal utility, and it helps a lot in the economy in various diverse areas, starting with producer equilibrium. This indifference curve is important for the consumer. At the same time, it is also useful for the producer. When is the producer is in equilibrium? The producer is in equilibrium when he is getting the maximum productivity by the various factors of production. That means where the factors of production and the marginal productivity of the factors of production is maximum, that is the point of producer equilibrium. Just like in actually knowing the consumer equilibrium, we use price line and indifference curve. In the same manner, we use the concept ISO cost line. ISO cost line and the ISO product curve. These two important in order to know the producer equilibrium. The producer will be equilibrium where ISO cost line is tangent to the ISO product curve. When they are both tangent to each other, at that point the producer is getting the maximum productivity from the inputs. So, producer equilibrium is also located through the analysis of indifference. The second point is consumer equilibrium. With the help of indifference, we try to locate the point of consumer equilibrium. When will be the consumer in equilibrium? When the consumer is getting the maximum satisfaction by spending its limited income in consuming the combination of two commodities. So, it is the position of no change, because whatever is the satisfaction the consumer is getting, he does not want to increase any further consumption, and at the same time neither interested to reduce the consumption. That means it is the ideal point where the consumer is getting the maximum satisfaction. And in order to locate the consumer equilibrium, as I discussed in the previous class, it should be tangent, your price line should be tangent to the indifference curve. This is your indifference curve, AB is your price line and this point E is your equilibrium point, denoting you are consuming this much of commodity Y and this much of commodity X, and the consumer is getting the maximum satisfaction. So, with the help of indifference curve, you try to locate the equilibrium of the consumer, because the behavior of consumer is rational in nature. Next, index number problem. Basically, the problem arises in order to know or in order to compare the behavior of the consumer from the previous year to the year which you are comparing. So, indifference curve technique is very helpful in order to correlate, in order to compare the behavior of the consumer. With the help of the indifference curve, you are locating the consumer equilibrium, and consumer equilibrium is maximum satisfaction out of limited income by consuming two commodities. So, with the different period and with different prices of the same commodity, the consumer is going to compare whether there is change in the behavior of the consumer or there is no change in the behavior of the consumer with the passage of time. So, indifference curve analysis helps in solving the problem of index number with the help of price line and indifference curve map. Next point is taxation. Taxation form the basis for the generation of government revenue. It is through the taxation the government try to increase its revenue and through which the government is going to do the various expenditure in the economy. So, this indifference curve really helps in locating or you can say in charging the taxation from the individual consumer, so that the maximum benefit should be given to each individual. So, generally indifference curve try to locate the equilibrium for the consumer where they are getting the maximum satisfaction. So, the government will charge direct taxes such as income and the indirect tax such as GST on various goods and services. How much they are going to charge for various types of taxation for the generation of the revenue, so that it is going to provide the welfare to each and every taxpayer. So, this indifference curve analysis actually helps in deciding the revenue to be charged by the government in the form of direct and indirect taxes. Next, measurement of consumer surplus. Consumer surplus basically means the benefits the consumer have from consuming the commodity. So, consumer surplus is the difference what consumer expect to pay and what consumer is actually paying. Suppose I expect to pay for the product 100 rupees. I am expecting that I will pay this 100 rupees. But in reality, I am just paying 80 rupees. So, 100 minus 80 is the 20 is the consumer surplus. So, this consumer surplus is also studied with the help of cardinal utility analysis, but there is drawback. So, with the help of indifference curve analysis, we can also locate the consumer surplus. And consumer surplus is what? The difference what I am expecting to pay and what I actually pay. So, in indifference curve, the price line is what? What I am actually paying. An indifference curve or indifference map denotes the various preferences which I am ready to pay. So, with the help of the price line and the indifference map, I can easily locate the consumer surplus. the benefit the consumer is going to receive from consuming two commodities by spending their limited income. Income and substitution effect. The biggest drawbacks of cardinal utility analysis is that it only considered one utility at a time and it is not considered the income and the substitution effect. But indifference curve actually considered the impact of income and the substitution effect. No doubt, this theory assumes the income of the consumer need to be constant, the price of the product need to be constant. But at the same time, if there is any change in the income of the consumer, or if there is any change in the price of the commodity, then what will be the change? That is shown with the help of income effect and substitution effect. For example, when the income of the consumer is increasing, no doubt you are going to increase the consumption of goods and services. And when the price of the product is reducing, at the same time you are able to purchase more commodity within that limited income. So it will definitely going to affect the equilibrium. Either you are going to shift towards right of the price line or you are going to shift towards the left of the price line, depending whether your income is increasing or decreasing, or whether the price of the product is increasing or decreasing. So this income and substitution effect is also discussed, and the impact on consumer behavior is discussed through the indifference curve analysis. Analysis of substitute. Marginal rate of substitution actually state the rate at which you are going to substitute one commodity with the other commodity. And the slope of indifference curve itself denote whether you are substituting at an increasing rate, decreasing rate, constant rate or zero rate. So with the help of indifference curve, you are actually substituting the product. Either the product can be a complementary product, it can be a substitute product or unrelated goods. So somewhere there is a relation between the commodities, and with every consumption pattern and with every preference pattern of the consumer, this is going to reflect the rate in change. And with the help of indifference curve, I can prioritize which particular goods you are preferring for other goods. So in this manner, with the help of indifference curve, I am substituting my combination, whether I will be liking combination A, B, C, D, E, that totally depends on the behavior of the consumer. Proportionality rule. Indifference curve also discussed the rule of proportionality, and it is different from the cardinal approach. Cardinal approach considered the utility from the commodity and its price. But indifference curve discussed in a detailed manner marginal rate of substitution of X commodity for Y is change in Y upon change in X, that is delta Y upon delta X, and it is equal to marginal utility of X upon marginal utility of Y. That means when you are increasing the consumption of X, you have to reduce the consumption of Y. and when you are increasing the consumption of X, the marginal utility from the X is reducing through successive unit, and the marginal utility of Y is increasing because you are reducing the consumption of Y. So, at respective prices, you are increasing and decreasing the consumption of the commodity, and thereby the effect on their marginal utility. So, the marginal utility lost is equal to the utility gain. So, this actually discussed the rule of proportionality in a logical manner. Consumer preference. As indifference curve says that consumer can choose any combination of the two commodity and consumer remain indifferent because each and every combination is giving the equal satisfaction. So, consumer preference, consumer is going to prefer, consumer is going to decide, and that is why as you are moving up in the indifference map, it is showing the high preferences of the two commodities, and as you are moving towards the left, towards the lower side in the indifference map, there is less combination of the two commodities and consumer is preferring less. So, with the help of indifference curve, you are actually preferencing A over B, B over C, C over D, which particular combination is giving you the satisfaction. 1 banana, 5 orange, or 5 banana, 1 orange. Both are giving the same satisfaction, but which combination you are liking, this is the choice, and this is decided with the help of indifference curve. So, that was all the advantages, the benefit of indifference curve. Indifference curve actually helps a lot. It is practical in comparison to the ordinal approach. It is not actually measuring the utility in terms of money, in terms of number, rather it actually telling us that we are preferring one commodity over the other commodity. Now, the limitation of indifference curve. Every theory is based on assumption, and the very assumption of every theory itself is the limitation of that theory, because theory are bound exist in the assumptions, but in reality nothing is static, everything changes. So, somewhere the assumption of the theory get lost when it comes to the real world, and that becomes the criticism of that particular theory. So, the very first limitation of this theory is unrealistic assumption. This theory is based on various assumptions, but the most important assumption is that consumer always behave in a rational manner. But in reality, the consumer are not always rational. Sometimes they do behave irrational. So, logically you are not planning every time with cost and benefit analysis, maximum satisfaction. Sometimes due to because of habit, preference, you do behave like a irrational consumer. Next, income and wealth effect. As per this theory, the income of the consumer is constant, but with the passage of the time, there is change in the income. So, the income of the consumer cannot be remain constant throughout its life, and this theory assumes the income of the consumer need to be constant. But as economy is changing, as there is development, the income of the consumer is getting changed. So, what will happen? When the income of the consumer is going to change, it is going to increase, definitely it is going to bring some changes in their behavior. In the behavior of purchasing the commodity, consuming the commodity, their taste, their preference and likes. Because when you have, then only you can spend. And when you don't have, then you can't spend. So income and wealth do change in real world. But this theory assumes the income and wealth need to be constant. Assumption of perfect competition. As per this theory, it assumes there should be a perfect competition in the market where each and every consumer knows everything about the market, about the product, about the prices, about the various substitutes available in the market. That means consumer is having the perfect knowledge about the market. So when the consumer is having the perfect knowledge, so they are actually behaving in a rational manner and getting the maximum satisfaction. But in reality, it is next to impossible for any consumer to have a complete, detailed and perfect knowledge about any market. Because in market there is large number of sellers selling varieties of goods. They are competitive goods. So how can you remember each and every goods with their prices, quality, features and everything? So this is the drawback. And when you don't have a perfect knowledge, sometime out of ignorance, you do take a decision which is not going to give you the maximum satisfaction. And this is the limitation of this theory. That means every consumer does not have a complete, detailed and perfect knowledge about the market. Next, limited reality. The indifference curve approach assumes that consumer preferences are based only on utility derived out of a commodity or service and does not consider the sociological and psychological factors that may have impact on buying and consumption decision of consumer. This theory is limited in reality. This theory says we are going to choose the commodity as per the utility derived from the commodity. We are going to use that commodity which is giving us the maximum utility, maximum satisfaction. But in reality, there are various factors that actually directly or indirectly impact our behavior. Whatever is going in the society, sociological factor, emotional factor, cultural factors, legal factors, all these factors do impact, and sometimes we do choose the commodity which is giving us the less satisfaction. So it does not only depend upon the utility from the product. Sometimes we do make a decision and after consuming the product, we feel that we have actually wasted our money. Sometimes people say, okay, go to that particular restaurant, and we just went. What happened? After having the food, you feel the food was really bad. That means whatever you have invested in the form of money, you are not getting any satisfaction. Assumption of two commodities only. As per this theory, it considered only two commodities need to be consumed. But in reality, the consumer are consuming more than two commodities. So this is the criticism of this theory, which considered only two commodities to be used. Inadequate treatment of necessities and luxury. The approach does not take into consideration the differences that consumer may actually have in preference of necessary and luxury commodities. This model treats all the commodities as substitute or complementary goods. This assumption treats only the good in the form of substitution. Either it can be substitute goods, complementary goods, unrelated good, but it does not talk about the necessaries goods and the luxurious goods. Because the necessaries and luxurious goods, the pattern of the consumer do get change. So this was not discussed. Necessary goods you are going to purchase at any cost, and luxurious goods you are going to purchase depending upon your income. The people belonging to richer class, they buy more product when the product is costly. So this concept was not discussed in the indifference. That means what should be the behavior of the consumer in regard with the necessary and the luxurious item. Lack of knowledge of indifference map. It is assumed for the consumer equilibrium in the indifference map that they are aware of the substitution rate between two commodities and several combinations that offer them equal satisfaction, although it is not true. Each and every indifference curve shown in the indifference map, the consumer is not actually knowing the rate at which one commodity is going to be substituted. So the consumer is not having the clear idea about the indifference map. So this become a choice of combination to choose which particular combination of the two commodities. Time frame. This indifference curve approach assumes that the preference of the consumer remains constant over time. But in reality, consumer preferences are subject to change because of variation in demographic and change in trend. This theory assumes the pattern of purchasing, the behavior of the consumer always remains constant throughout the period. But the various external factors with the passage of the time, they actually affect, they actually make us forced to change our consumer behavior. Consumer behavior means to change the pattern of purchasing and consuming the goods. So this is all about for today's session, in which we have discussed the limitations and the importance of the indifference curve analysis. We have discussed in detail what is indifference curve, the features, the properties, marginal rate of substitution, price line, consumer equilibrium, importance and limitations in this chapter. In the next lecture, we are going to start with the topic revealed preference theory. So thank you for today's session.